I'm Claudia. Standing here at the airport curb, watching my husband Mark's silhouette vanish through the sliding glass doors, I feel a strange sense of calm. Little did he know that as he kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me, he was walking into the end of his well-laid plan. I'm about to take out my phone, hands steady, and set in motion the counter plan I've carefully crafted. It all started a few years ago. I had bought my 4-bedroom colonial on Elmwood Drive. I saved up the money over 6 years working as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm. It was no glamorous job, but it was mine, built on countless late-night coding sessions and early morning meetings. The house was my dream come true, a porch where I could sit with a cup of coffee on Sunday mornings, a yard big enough for a small garden, and a kitchen with plenty of counter space. 2 years after I bought the house, I met Mark at a tech conference. He was a financial advisor at a firm that sometimes collaborated with mine. He was charming, with a warm smile and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. 6 months into our relationship, he asked to see my house. I welcomed him in without a second thought. He stood in the kitchen, looked around, and said, "You've created something amazing here." At the time, I thought it was genuine admiration. Now I know it was the start of his appraisal. We got married 18 months later in a small ceremony by the lake. His mother, Vivian, wore a pale blue dress that was a bit too showy for the occasion and spent the reception critiquing the catering. His father, Howard, was a quiet man, a retired mechanic with a penchant for tinkering with old cars. They lived in a small apartment on the other side of town. For the first 2 years of our marriage, life was simple. Mark and I both worked, split the bills, and had dinner together most nights at the kitchen table I'd refinished myself. I loved those evenings, the smell of dinner on the stove, and the way Mark would ask about my day. But looking back, I realized that my contentment made me an easy target. 8 months before this airport moment, Mark came home one Thursday evening looking troubled. "My parents are having a hard time," he said. "The rent in their apartment has gone up again, and Dad's not getting as many jobs." He paused. "I've been helping them out a bit financially. I should have told you." I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. "How much and for how long?" I asked. He admitted to sending $400 a month since February. It was October, which meant $3,200 had left our joint account without my knowledge. I told him he should have been honest, but I let it go, thinking it was a family matter. 4 months later, in April, Vivian called me at work. "Claudia," she said in that overly sweet tone, "Howard and I have been thinking. It would make sense for us to move in with you. There's so much space in your house." I was taken aback. I told her I'd talk to Mark. When I brought it up with him that night, he'd already made up his mind. "It's just for a little while," he said. "They're my parents, and they need our help." I was shocked that he'd made the decision without consulting me. But I agreed, thinking we could set some boundaries. They moved in on a Saturday, bringing 3 carloads of stuff. Vivian immediately started rearranging my kitchen, saying she was just trying to be helpful. Howard spent his days in the garage, working on an old car he'd brought with him. The first month was uncomfortable. Vivian would cook without asking and then give me a look when I said I wanted to cook myself. Mark started working late, coming home around 9 p.m. Every other night. I noticed his phone was always face down on the kitchen table. When I mentioned it, he said he was trying to be present at dinner. I believed him, but I started to watch more closely. One Sunday morning in May, Vivian asked me about the house deed. "Is it in both your names?" she asked. "It's just in mine," I replied. "I bought it before we got married." She nodded slowly, saying it might be something to address legally for family planning purposes. I told her it was already taken care of. 4 weeks after that conversation, I found a manila folder while looking for a charger in the home office. Inside were 6 pages. The first was a legal consultation summary from a law firm I'd never heard of, about transferring the sole ownership property to joint marital ownership. The second page was an email thread between Mark and Vivian. Mark wrote to Mom, "We need to do this before I leave for the overseas assignment. It'll be easier if she signs voluntarily." I sat there in the office, the sound of the TV from the living room in the background, and realized the truth. Mark was planning to leave for an overseas job, install his parents in my house, and transfer the property into joint ownership. He'd been working on this for months, using our relationship and my trust against me. That night, after Mark came home and fell asleep, I waited for 40 minutes. Then I slipped out of bed, went back to the office, and photographed all 6 pages of the folder. I sent them to my personal email and a cloud storage folder. The next morning, I called my attorney, Mr. Thompson. He'd handled my house purchase and reviewed the prenuptial agreement that Mark had thought was unnecessary. I showed him the photographs, and he quickly analyzed the situation. "The prenuptial agreement clearly states the house is your separate property," he said. "Their consultation is just exploratory. But we need to act." We mapped out a plan. I decided to wait until Mark left for his overseas assignment. Once he was gone, his leverage would be gone. The week before the airport, Mark finally told me about the overseas job offer. It was a 4-year position in Dubai. He said it was a great opportunity and that his parents could take care of the house while he was away. I listened calmly, asking questions about the details. I knew this was the final piece of the timeline I needed. On the day of his flight, I drove him to the airport. We drove mostly in silence. He talked about the logistics in Dubai and assured me his parents would be fine. As we neared the airport, I mentioned the 6 credit cards in my name that he had. He said he'd use them for setup costs and that the firm would reimburse him. At the departures terminal, he kissed me and said, "This is going to be good for us." I kissed him back, held his gaze for a second, and then watched him walk away. Once he was out of sight, I took out my phone. I first checked the banking app. Over the past 6 days, I'd quietly transferred all but the minimum balance from our joint account to my individual account. Then I opened the credit card management app. I'd already removed Mark as an authorized user on 5 of the 6 cards the day before. I removed him from the last one right there on the curb. When I got home, Vivian was in the kitchen making tea. "How was the drive?" she asked. I took off my coat and said, "Fine." "He got off all right." I looked at her and said, "I know about the folder." Her face didn't collapse, but I could see a change. She tried to deny it, but I showed her I had the evidence. I told her I'd shared it with my attorney, removed Mark from the credit cards, and filed for divorce. Vivian sat down at the table. "You were never going to sign willingly," she said. I replied, "The house is mine, and the prenuptial agreement makes that clear." I told them they had 60 days to leave the house. I also informed them that my attorney had sent a cease and desist to the law firm they'd consulted. Mark started calling and texting me after he landed in Dubai. His messages went from "What's going on?" to "Are you serious about the divorce?" to "Think about my parents." I didn't respond. I let my attorney handle all communication. The 60 days were not easy. Vivian tried to contact me a few times, but my attorney sent her a warning letter. Mark's lawyer argued that his contributions to the household gave him an interest in the house. I told him I understood his reasons, but his assumption that I wouldn't notice or act was his biggest mistake. He said he was sorry, but it sounded hollow. In May, Vivian and Howard moved out. When the last box was loaded, Vivian said, "You're smarter than I thought." I simply replied, "I know." 6 months later, here I am, sitting on my porch on a November morning. The foundation is repaired, the divorce is final, and I have my house back. I've lost a marriage, but I've gained the strength to stand up for myself. I look at the cardinal on the railing and know that I've come out of this stronger.